And welcome to our first podcast, Psych Revolution, Weaponize Your Mental Health. Matt and I have been talking about this for a long time now and finally decided to take the plunge and basically do a mental health podcast that talks about pretty much anything and everything to do with mental health, the mental health system in the United States, the mental health system in the world, skills, just kind of like overall all topics related to mental health and try to get some skills and validation and normalization out there for some people. My name is Kelly, and this is...
I go by Seafish. Some of you may or may not know me from some other places all over the internet, but they don't matter. What matters is here, where my entire perspective on this is the mental health system in this country is, let's say, challenging. And we're here to help bring that DIY revolutionary punk ethos to mental health, because we can do this without the system. Well, except for MADS, but that's going to be a different episode. But the rest of this, you don't need therapists. You don't even need health insurance. And we're going to help put some of the info out there. And we will have links to each episode. So make sure you do click below, like us, follow us, share us, comment, tell me you hate me. I don't care, but tell us what we're doing right or wrong.
Absolutely. And just to clarify a little bit on what Matt said about, like, not needing a therapist, is there are a lot of things that a lot of us deal with on a day-to-day basis when it comes to our mental health that are extremely debilitating. And sometimes it takes just learning a couple of skills or learning how to check in with yourself that allows you to continue on living a life worth living instead of constantly being hindered by your mental health and the lack of access there is for mental health help in the United States. I personally, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast is about 7 years ago, I was diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a mouthful, I know. And BPD. And BPD is a borderline personality disorder. So I do have a personality disorder. And with becoming an advocate for myself and forcing myself to go into programs and do the things that I needed to do to get my life straight, allowed me to be in a position where now I can share that with other people. A lot of my friends are listening to this. Fish knows this with conversations I've had with him. Since I took, a lot of the workshops that I had been in, I shared those skills with everybody I know because they are extremely accessible. It's just a lot of people don't know how to get there. And that's why we're here to, try to just promote and put that information out there so people can weaponize their mental health and become tools for themselves to essentially hack through the system. So today's show, we're going to go into a little bit just about like the general information about the mental health system in the United States, some statistics, some information for you guys. A lot of that information is going to be like WTF. And then we're going to do a mindfulness exercise, and I'm going to go into talking a little bit about what dialectical behavioral therapy is. I'm not going to go into too much about it right now because we want to get into the discussion, but that's just kind of what's on the plate for today. Fish and I also discussed that at the beginning of every episode, we are going to release trigger warnings. We want to make sure that everyone's who's listening understands what we're going to be talking about and has the proper trigger warnings. So today's episode, we're going to be covering a lot of different things, including binging and purging. Those of you who don't know what that is, basically anorexia or bulimia. We're going to be talking about self-harm, suicide threats, suicide, possibly addiction. COVID might come up. And I do know for some people, COVID can be a triggering subject. So moving forward, those are the trigger warnings for this episode. Matt, do you have anything else you want to add to that? Oh, I'm sorry. I know you as Matt. Fish.
It's totally cool. Like I said, not exactly a secret. I just use it for continuity at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share a little bit. So, I've never had an official diagnosis, and like, I mean, other than I am going to a therapist and I am presently on meds, my technical knowledge is very limited. It's more from having spent a lot of time working on self-awareness, reading, researching, figuring out what's what. And I definitely have depression, anxiety, and I don't know whether it's PTSD or CPTSD, and I have no clue how much came from my home life or my time in the service. But there's a whole lot going on here, and I mean, currently I'm in a situation where I am fortunate to have affordable mental health services, but also they're not there all the time. It's a thing that's said in 12-step program, which is at the end of the day, you're alone with yourself, which is what we are here to hopefully assist y'all with. Is when you are with yourself, you've got the tools you need to start unscrewing whatever garbage is going on inside your head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Some of the hardest times I've experienced on some of the low points in my mental health are the times when you are by yourself and you don't know what to do and you don't know how to deal with the emotional dysregulation that you're dealing with. And sometimes somebody just sitting there and telling you like, hey, this has worked for me. You know what I mean? And then you try it and it does work. That's great. Sometimes it doesn't work. But I think in those situations, it kind of lights that fire under your butt, for lack of a better term, to be like, okay, well, this didn't work. What does? And I think that's really important because everybody's different. And something that works for me is not necessarily going to be the same thing that works for you, which is one of the reasons why Fish and I decided to, you know, kind of give a rundown over the next couple episodes of what DBT is. To start giving people tools that they can use in emotionally dysregulated states. It's one of the hardest places to be in. You know, your brain's firing on all cylinders, and it's not on the logical side of your brain and you're trying to figure out a calculus problem. It's the emotional part of your brain. And I don't know about you guys, but when you're that emotionally dysregulated, you're essentially telling yourself to calm down. And I don't know about you, but when anybody ever tells me to calm down when I'm upset, that's the last thing that I want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving forward, we're just going to kind of talk about a little bit about the mental health system in the United States. I did some research on some numbers and just some general facts that I thought were important, or I don't want to say necessarily fun knowledge, but effective, useful knowledge that you can use. So for instance, the United States population as of January 1st, 2022 was roughly about 332 million, which I was like, damn, that's a lot of people. I didn't know we had that much. But out of that number, 19% of adults, this isn't even considering adolescents, just adults over the age of 18, 47 million people are dealing with mental health disorders. 47 million people. So to put that into perspective, at least for me, I live in California, I live in the Bay Area. San Francisco is roughly about 1 million people. That means that you would need 47 San Franciscos to equate the amount of people that are dealing with mental health in the United States. That is a massive number. Massive number.
And I mean, I currently live in Western Pennsylvania, but I moved out here from Long Beach, California, and having been to the Bay Area quite a bunch, you just go out in San Francisco or Long Beach and you see, like, I could hop on my skateboard and skate about a mile and probably see no less than 20 examples of horribly untreated mental health.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's not affordable. It's not, it's in that 47 million people, 4.55%, you know, yes, we're getting into statistics, are experiencing severe mental illness. So out of that 47 million, 15 million people are dealing with severe mental illness. And some of you might be asking, okay, what does that mean? What does severe mental health illness mean? So I looked it up and got the technical definition, and it says it's anyone over the age of 18. And I just want to clarify, one of the reasons why a lot of the research that I'm doing is specifically over the age of 18 is because a lot of the emotional dysregulation that happens in puberty, we all know it, we all went through it, is very hard to diagnose because you don't know if that's just hormones and part of the kid's journey into becoming a young adult, or if it's actually something that's diagnosable. So I wanted to stick with facts that you could actually verify. So if anybody under the age of 18 is actually listening or watching, please go and do your own research, because I guarantee you the numbers are going to be different. So, yeah.
I've got couple of things. So first off, okay, if you're in your 20s or your 30s, like me, and you still feel that horrifically emotionally dysregulated as when you were a teenager, it's definitely time to seek help. Yes, that's not advice, absolutely. That's a given fact. Something's wrong.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with that. And a lot of people who are in that situation, you know, to tie into our discussion, don't get the mental health they need because of what?
Affordability or other situations where, at least in our generation, it was not common. People thought you were friggin' crazy if you did mental health. So
it was stigmatized. Absolutely.
So the majority, like I knew a very, very few people who were seeking any mental health treatment prior to their adult years. And I mean, realistically, the treatment they were getting was it's come a long way in the past 20 years.
Oh, and, absolutely.
On severe mental illness, like the very severe, so you go out, you see people crapping in the streets, fighting street signs, fighting invisible people. I've seen all of this in literally one day. That's severe mental illness. And I think we need to find a stat of how many of those that suffer from that are our unhoused population.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Later on in the podcast, I fully plan on us doing a bit on homelessness in America and the contribution that mental health has to that. So really quick, I just want to get to the serious mental illness definition super quick. Yeah. It's someone over the age of 18 who has had or has in the past year. So you require 12 months of reporting symptoms to be considered to have a serious mental illness that is diagnosable. And it is either a mental, a behavioral, or emotional disorder that causes serious functional impairment that sustainably interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. So to just clarify kind of what that means is your mental health is keeping you from living a quote unquote normal day-to-day life. Example, someone who has a depressive disorder. If you don't go and get out of bed for 2 weeks out of every month, that is a serious mental health disorder. If you suffer from anxiety and it keeps you from leaving your house, seeing your friends, you know, that is a serious mental health disorder. And if this is something that's happened over, you know, the past 12 months, now it's diagnosable. So just to clarify a little bit on that. And then I also wanted to clarify on what functional impairment means. So it refers to limitations within the illness. So you can't carry out like certain functions, like for instance, once again, if you're super depressed and you're not eating, you're not showering, you're not brushing your teeth, you're not changing your clothes, you're not feeding your cat or your animals, that is functional impairment. Your disability is keeping you from functionally working due to your impairment. So something else that I also wanted to touch on is since COVID, we all know, the numbers have actually gone up. The amount of anxiety and depressive orders that the amount of people who have those from before COVID to after COVID, the numbers have gone up 8%. And we are talking about millions of people. I couldn't get any exact numbers. I spent like an hour online trying to find an exact number to give y'all, and I couldn't find it, but that is a significant increase. And something that I found to be extremely frustrating, and Fish, I don't know if you've experienced this since COVID, but lack of accessibility even more so than before because the system's overloaded. I was actually told by my therapist that I've done so many programs within the medical insurance that I have that they want me to pick a graduation date, right? A date where I stop going there. So she told me to like, hey, go call other places, like see if you can find another therapist that does like sliding fee. I spent 2 weeks and called over 280 therapists in the Bay Area, and they would either not see me because I have a personality disorder, or they were so booked that they couldn't see me for 3 months.
Right.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Like, how? And, you know, don't get me wrong. Most of my family is medical professionals. So I do understand that everyone is overloaded right now. But when you're working with a system that was broken in the first place, and then everything gets broken, and then people need help, where are they supposed to go?
Exactly. And I mean, most people don't know where to go. I mean, if your mental state is that bad, odds are you're having a hard enough time even grabbing your phone to look for a therapist.
Absolutely. And then you go online and you look it up, and you know, you Google it, and you get like this list of all these therapists. You don't know what they specialize in.
Yeah.
You don't know if it's sliding fee. And, you know, then you have to do what I did, which was literally just like look through a directory and just start calling numbers. And after a certain amount of time, even with all the skills and everything that I've gone through to help me live my day-to-day life, like I was almost in tears because I was like, okay, half of the people don't want to deal with me because they can't, because they don't have the room. And the other half of you don't want to deal with me because I have a personality disorder. So, yeah, accessibility is definitely something that is an issue in the United States, well, around the world, but we're more so going to, you know, talk about the United States today. Fish, I wanted to ask you, when it comes to like your mental health and like what you have available to you where you're at in Western Pennsylvania, you don't have to give like exact numbers or anything like that, you know, respect your privacy, but comparatively to California, how much more or less is the access that you're getting right now?
I mean, my access happens to be good, and I mean, there is a chance it's working out because I'm in a less populated area than pretty much any of California. But originally it was because I had to pay, what was it, about $200 to talk to a therapist, literally, or a psychiatrist, literally for the purpose of getting prescribed meds.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, because it cost so much, it was mostly on my own, because it's like, I haven't taken these meds before. I talked to her good friend, Jilly B, quite a bit about it before I decided on what. But most of it was I had a friend I could talk to, and not everyone does. And then my meds have been cheap, thank God, but I still had to have 200 literally to talk to someone for like 5 minutes just for the purpose of going on meds. And that was because, and part of that was, and it took me a long time to go back to therapy because I went through therapy, and it's not that she was a bad therapist. It's just, it wasn't working for me. All it was doing was helping me open up everything that was locked up. And I'm like, well, that's great. But now I've got this, you know, open sewage of literally all of my trauma I'm standing in, and I have no clue what to do about it.
So are you saying that like you don't necessarily feel like in a way you got your money's worth, that like you just like shelled out a whole bunch of money to somebody who basically ripped the Band-Aid off and then smiled and waved and told you to deal with it?
Well, the first therapist I definitely didn't quite get. although I didn't pay the health insurance paid for it, but nonetheless, I paid them. No, I didn't get my money's worth. Now with the other one, well, the price was a little steep. At least I accomplished the entire goal of it, which was get prescribed fads.
How long
And
did it
now,
take you to, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but how long did it take you, like, of a time span to, like, start looking, get hooked up, figure out that you didn't like the first therapist, and then, like, actually get to the psychiatrist to get your goal met?
so the first therapist I was seeing talking on the phone for um maybe like 6 months, I want to say. And then we moved out here and I wasn't doing anything and shit got super bad. Like I had developed severe anhedonia and I'm still pissed that my therapist, when I talked about, okay, let's stop for just a sec. So anhedonia is where literally nothing feels good. Like like I don't care if you shower, because I'm still more or less what you would call high functioning. I'd shower, I'd feed myself, I'd get dressed every day, do all that, but it's like I was basically a ghost. And it got even worse moving out here. I mean, I like that it's quiet, and I didn't mind that I don't really know anyone, because hell, it was COVID. I was barely talking to anyone anyways. But just being like that much kind of stuck with myself. I mean, my partner's at work and doesn't have the same reality I do, so you can only understand so well. But
Mm-hmm.
if you feel you have symptoms of anhedonia and you're telling your therapist and they're not calling it out saying that, then honestly fire your therapist, because you are wasting your time. Trust me, I learned that the hard way.
No, I have to completely agree with that. We're going to bust myself out a little bit. I am 34 and I have been in and out of therapy for probably about 20 years. And there have been multiple occasions where I've had to, even as a teenager, like tell my mom, like, this isn't working. Sometimes you don't mesh with the therapist. You know what I mean? Sometimes they have a different communication style and they just don't understand what you're saying. Or you get really unlucky and you get one of those therapists that's really burnt out and,
Yeah.
just kind of wants to get the people in and out of the door. And like, that's really frustrating. Um, when you're trying to communicate things to someone and they're not listening. Because I had the same exact thing happen to me from about 16 until like my mid 20s. All of the therapists that I saw constantly were diagnosing me as manic depressive. And I kept telling them, I'm dealing with suicidal ideation and like all of these other things. And they weren't taking that in. And then finally, in my late 20s, I got hooked up with a therapist, a PhD therapist through Kaiser. And within 10 minutes of talking with me, she was like, you have BPD. And I was like, what the F is that? And, she explained it to me. She explained all the symptoms. And then finally, it was like a light bulb went off in my head. And I was like, oh my God, that's it. You know what I mean? And like being able to have, for me, at least in this situation, like a name for what I have so I can go and research it and learn about, like, made me feel so much better. But it took me almost 20 years of going through therapists to actually get one that would actually fucking listen. So I think there's a lot of like, spider, almost like a lightning bolt, when it comes to issues and regulation within our mental health system. This comparison comes up in my mind, and it's kind of a weird comparison considering where the world and the country is right now. But I really do think, in a way, mental health professionals are a lot like cops, and I'll tell you why. Cops are expected to be cops, and I'm not defending cops in any way, but they are expected to be social workers, therapists, cops, investigators, supportive staff, all of this other stuff, right? That they're not necessarily trained for. And then you have all of these therapists that have to help people, who are suicidal, help people who are dealing with suicidal ideation, help people who are dealing with eating disorders. And you have all of these different types of people that you're trying to treat. but you have no support. I have so many friends that are therapists that right now, very much like teachers, are pulling their hair out right now because not only do they not have the ability to provide the accessibility to other people, they're not provided with accessibility to the resources they need to help the people they're trying to help. And it's just constantly like, it's almost like a dog chasing your tail. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like trying to find some sort of, solution for the answer, because it really isn't accessible. Fish and I were talking about this over the past couple of days. I did a lot of research about like the national annual income, how much it costs, average. And I know averages can be kind of skewed. But adding up, car insurance and car, if it's someone who drives a car, someone who takes public transportation, someone who rides a bike. I did research on all of this. And then how much it costs for utilities, electricity, garbage, cell phone bill, internet, car insurance, all of these things. And with the national average income being at $67,521, the average American is in the red before they can even buy food. Now, with that being said, the national average to see a therapist paying privately, not with insurance, is between $100 and $200. So if you're already in the red, how are you supposed to be able to afford, one, to even go see a therapist?
Yeah.
And that doesn't even include the national average to see a psychiatrist if you need medication, which is $200 to $300 an hour, plus the cost of meds if you're private pay. So Matt, what are your feelings on this? Like, how do you feel about the fact that, like, literally with the national average income, you can't afford mental health?
No. And then people wonder why we live in this absolutely broken dystopia. I'm like, well, it's because no one who's making decisions gives a shit about mental health.
Or if they do, the uphill battle that they have to, go, it seems insurmountable. I mean, I personally feel, and I kind of feel like Fish, you might agree with me on this, that there are a lot of issues in American culture, specifically American culture, that necessarily may not be resolved, but could really be helped out with an increase in accessibility for mental health. Guns is a really good example. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of people out there, and I'm not going to hate on anybody or shame anybody in any way, shape, or form for having a mental health disorder. But there are a lot of people out there who have mental health disorders who should not be allowed to own a gun. And those, sometimes, not all, are the people who end up misusing them in ways that eventually end up hurting a lot of other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on for hours about all of the correlations and, things that could be changed by making mental health more accessible. But I think the bare minimum is, I feel like with the way that this country approaches mental health is, it's like, shut up and put up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's like, well, when I'm broken, my hands are broken and my bootstraps don't work, how am I supposed to do that?
Yeah.
They
put this weird emphasis on, you've got to be a good worker and show up. I'm like, yeah, due to my mental health, you know how many times I just made up some bullshit so I could walk away from work that day?
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many days I faked food poisoning for jobs because I was just like, I am not here today. I can't do this. I already know I'm emotionally dysregulated because I'm crying and I haven't even gotten out of bed. I'm staying home today and watching anime, self-care. But no, I totally feel that. So let's see. I apologize. This is our first podcast. So I am going to be kind of like looking down at my notes and everything like that. And so we get the flow down a little bit. So sorry for like the teacher whiteboard situation here. So a couple more numbers before we move on possibly to the next subject is I did look up the average cost yearly for medical insurance for somebody in the United States is $622 a month.
Jeez.
$622 a month. And that's if you're paying for it out of pocket. Now that means that like your job doesn't provide it and they're not paying some of the premiums. Like if you work like a job as a server or, you know, something in the service industry or the hospitality industry, and you don't get medical insurance through your job, which I know I was a server and a restaurant manager for 10 years, you don't get shit. You're paying $622 a month.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a third of your income for some people.
A third that you probably don't have.
Especially with the numbers that I found and you already being in the red before you buy food. How are you supposed to come up with $622 for medical insurance? I would like someone to please comment on this video and tell me why so I can start making some money. Because in the 20 years I've been doing this, I haven't been able to figure it out. And then, no, go ahead.
Like, if this country is going to decide that everyone needs to have healthcare, then okay, put my tax dollars to work and pay for it then. I already gave you all the money. Just do the right thing with it.
Personally, I would be way happier if they took out a like percentage of my tax return every year, which I know they can't like really, I don't think they can legally do. But anyways, take part of
legally,
I know they could take it if you like owe money and stuff, but regardless, I would much rather them take a certain percentage out of my tax return every year if it meant that I was going to have medical insurance for that entire year and I wasn't going to have to worry about anything.
Well, they could add that tax on to like our paychecks because they already take taxes out to start with. So why can't you just either make it an extra, or if it falls under something they already take, you take a higher number to cover that.
So what would your response be to someone who's like, yeah, but if they do that, I'm making less money?
I would rather be able to function and live a reasonably normal life and enjoy the money I do have. And I mean, never mind the argument about wages, but that would be covered on the Shades of Truth podcast.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, maybe we'll do a crossover into that and do an episode specifically on that.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people also need to realize is excuse me, I'm drinking coffee and it made me burp. Sorry. Is if you're paying out, for example, you know, like taxes on your paycheck, think of how much money you're saving on a yearly basis if you don't have medical insurance and you get COVID or you get strep throat or you get appendicitis and you have to get your appendix taken out. Think of all the money that you would have to spend paying for all of that out of pocket or figuring out a way to become like a charity case with whatever hospital you're working with. You wouldn't have to deal with all of that. Like you would be saving all of that money by just paying X amount from your paycheck to make sure that you and everyone else has health care.
I mean, and I guarantee that the amount would be less than $622 a month.
I would hope so.
Well, because if everybody who is working is paying in, then you spread it more evenly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree 110% about that. But
and as far as the answer, well, what about those people who don't work? Like, look, dude, I would rather give some money so maybe the homeless guy who's smoking crack and shitting his pants at the bus stop can get the help he needs to stop doing that.
And live a life worth living, because we all deserve that. I think we get
clearly
pushed down.
Because clearly someone who's that damaged at that time can't work, okay? So let's allow that to get sorted out so they can join and we increase the pot. Stuff's not hard. It's real simple math.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know. I just think like mental health is so stigmatized, you know, that like, I don't think people realize that like 30 or 40 years ago, like they were still chaining people to beds in mental institutions. Like we've come a long way, but we still have a very long way to go. And I think the more informed and more educated people are about their own personal situations. And the more they learn to be more effective in their own situations, they can spread that out. You know what I mean? Like, the more people who learn how to advocate for themselves, the better it is for everybody.
Well,
Everybody.
and I think part of our mental health issue is, now I have not researched the history, so I'm not trying to act like an expert. This is simply an observation I have. It seems as though the United States decided to build a prison industry system and pulled their mental health system from that. And I think that is why it is so broken and half-assed, because it seems as though, no, I'm not throwing shade at the therapists. I'm talking about our politicians and whatnot, people who make money decisions. It seems like they're looking at mental health like they looked at it when it was for prisoners of, well, we don't really give a shit, just give them something. And like I said, I don't know if that's the facts. It's just simply an observation.
Oh, no, totally. It's an observation and an opinion of your experience of what your personal experience has been through the mental health system. And that's absolutely valid. Absolutely valid. I used this term when I was younger. And also, by the way, I'm a completely open book in this podcast. So I have no shame when it comes to my mental health. I don't feel like I should. So I might be really open about myself. So just FYI, you might learn something new about Kelly. So when I was like 15, 16, was when I was first starting to be put on medication. Frankly, at the time, I didn't think I was, but I really was. I was completely an out of control teen. And one of the things that I used to say to my mom all the time, like, I would cheek the pills. I would and my mom would know I wasn't taking them because, I wasn't changing. Nothing was happening. And when I would take them, nothing would really happen. And then I would go back to my psychiatrist and he would give me something new. And I would tell my mom, I would use this term and I would say, Mom, I feel like I'm a guinea pig. Like, I feel like they're just throwing shit at a wall to see if it sticks. And if it sticks, it's like, oh, well, that one worked. And I know the medical science, including mental health, it's not an exact science. It's not perfect. Sometimes you do have to have that little bit of wiggle room, but it really did just kind of feel like they were just like, oh, this doesn't work, here, pop this one. Oh, this doesn't work, here, pop this one. And I wasn't getting educated on the pills. I wasn't getting educated on the side effects. None of it. It was just, here, take this red pill. Right. And I had no support from my mental health team.
Well, and when we were teenagers, so full disclosure, I'm 38. We came up in a generation where, and it happened to me with opiates instead of mood stabilizers, if you will, but it was literally doctors would, like, you could come in and they would throw pills at you, like, pretty much unseen. And I mean, I got some crap that didn't even have a name once.
That's so dangerous.
Like, FDA testing on it.
Oh my God. And they didn't have you sign a release form?
I was 17. It's not like they could make me.
Oh my Lord. The mom in me just wants to get all over that, but I'm not going to.
I should not. They didn't last long. A couple times then I'm like, this is a little heavy.
I swear, if in the next 10 years you get a superpower, let me know. For real.
Correct.
Wow.
Like all of a sudden I'm gonna, I don't know, become Wolverine or some. Well,
that'd start glowing in the dark.
That might be fun. I'd go take night walks, so that'd be a safety thing. If
Dude, you'd be the best person to have at a rave. Just oons, oons, oons,
I don't even need glow sticks.
You'd be the human glow stick. Oh my goodness, that's so funny. So really quick,
I self-medicated my whole way through high school.
I'm pretty sure a lot of us did.
Yeah.
At least in our generation. But really quick, just to kind of tie up in a way this portion of the podcast is everything that we just talked about regarding accessibility and the lack thereof and how much it costs. This is the end result of that for some people. In 2019, 40 million people worldwide committed suicide. 40 million. And like, I'm almost getting choked up talking about it because I am a suicide survivor. So that's a really big number. And I do believe, like, down to my core that, like, we as like a collective, the human race, can help that number go down, and get people the help that they need. Because when it really comes down to it, when it comes to mental health, you're fighting a losing battle against yourself. And learning these skills and getting the accessibility helps you weaponize your mental health and helps you get out of that. So that I just kind of wanted to kind of give that fact. Here in the United States, per day, 130 people commit suicide. That's roughly almost 3 people per state. That's a lot. And I know for a lot of people, they're like, oh, that's only like a couple of people. But those couple of people have families, have friends, have lovers, have children that are affected by this. And like I said before, I really, really, really strongly believe that it's up to us to make the change. If we continue to wait on the politicians and everything else to make the change, it's not going to happen. No, don't get me wrong. Continue to write your legislators, continue to write your governors, continue to talk to your healthcare professionals. Write the foundation, like I have Kaiser medical insurance. I can actually write the Kaiser Foundation and tell them things that I didn't like, things and they do actually take that into consideration. Weaponize your mental health to make it better for you, but to also make it better for everybody else. Because I guarantee you, the spot that you're in right now, somebody is also in that spot or who has been there before and needs help. So, okay, we're gonna, from that was a little emotional. And we're going to move on to sort of the fun part of the podcast. Something that Fish and I have also been talking about over the past, I don't know, like year, 2 years. We've talked about this for a while. Is DBT. And before we get into that, something that we did in DBT, well, I was in it, is we started any discussion with a mindfulness exercise. So I want anybody and everybody who's listening, I mean, if you're driving, just try to, take a deep breath. And I'm going to go ahead and set my timer on my phone. And for the next 2 minutes, we're going to have, what I say is take an open stance. And what I mean by an open stance is if you're sitting or you're standing, have palms open and up, because it's a welcoming stance. You're welcoming in the mindfulness. You get your feet flat on the floor. You kind of like get yourself as comfortable as possible. Some of the things that you can also do is it's called like a soft eye stance, where you just kind of like gently close your eyes. I know for me, closing my eyes in situations like that in a weird way is triggering. So I usually just kind of tend to like look down at the floor or find something bland sort of to look at that's not distracting. And what we're going to do through this exercise is for the next 2 minutes, what I'm going to have you do is you're going to breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to hold it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you're going to exhale for 7. And then you're going to do the inhale for 4, hold for 6, exhale for 7 for the next 2 minutes. And that just kind of gets your brain sort of in the sort of like open, mindful state of mind. That's not required, but is very helpful with talking about and dealing with DBT. So I got to wait for my facial recognition on my iPhone to work. So I am starting the timer now. All right, we're going to breathe in for now, you might notice as you do this that your mind wanders and you're thinking about different things. When that happens, try to take a non-judgmental stance, put a pin in it, save it for later. Continue to breathe in. Now, if you find yourself getting distracted, once again, I ask you to take a non-judgmental stance on this. Meditation and relaxation exercises are a practice. They are not a perfection. So if you find that all you can do is do the breathing, but not clear your mind, that's totally okay. That's a start. All right, got just a little over 30 seconds left. Continue breathing. Breathe out all of the stress and negative thoughts. About 10 more seconds left. See if you can get one more cycle in. All right. Stop my timer, which is extremely abrupt. It's the Tootsie Roll song from the 90s. So, all right. So now that we've done that, how you feeling? How you feeling, Fish?
It feels good. It's weird. It's going to take some getting used to because at least since I was a teenager, I've always had a very hard time with the sitting still for meditation because usually if I'm sitting still, I'm that depressed that I'm doing. Otherwise, I'm up and going. I don't necessarily have manic depression. I'm just usually ADHD. So unless I am that deep where it's like, not necessarily suicidal, it's more I just kind of want to stop existing. As a more accurate way for me to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is good. It's just going to be a learning process.
Absolutely. And that's what mindfulness is. It's very much like meditation. Like with me, the mindfulness activities work better for me than just the meditation apps where they're like, okay, we're going to play water in the background and you sit here for 20 minutes, and which is fine. That works for some people, and props to people who can do that. I can't, right? But the mindfulness exercises worked better for me because for some reason, the way my brain equates the whole situation is the mindfulness is less judgmental. So I'm able to actually do it because even at my height of being in DBT, like those 2-minute mindfulness exercises, 30 seconds in, I was like I couldn't sit still. I couldn't concentrate. But then my therapist who was running the program would be like, okay, like I said, like, don't judge yourself, because when it really comes down to it, very much like your mental health and boundaries and communication and everything else, it's a practice. You're not going to get it right the first time. You know what I mean?
So also for everyone out there, because this is more me, it might be more for other people. Now, here on the podcast, let's all do this. But outside of this, if sitting still doesn't work for you, because mindfulness comes from the Buddhists, well, they have another thing called walking meditation. So you go out, you walk, clearly your eyes are open, and you're doing your breathing, you're doing that mindfulness while you're on the move. And for me, that's 100 times easier. I mean, shit, I did it once and I ended up walking like 10 miles one day.
That's awesome. Actually, my therapist did talk about that. And something that she did bring up with that is while you're walking and you're trying to keep like an open mind, and you start getting that like mental static of like your life and your day and things that you got to do, and you got to take the laundry out of the dryer, and you got to take the dog for a walk and everything else like that, start taking a non-judgmental stance with your surroundings. Like, for instance, you're walking, that tree bark is brown, that flower is pink, the sky is blue, it's warm outside, it's windy, things that are objectively clarifiable, you know what I mean, within your surroundings, to help you keep that non-judgmental stance, but also continue performing the exercise that you need to do. Because I'm very much like, when I'm walking, sometimes I dissociate and I'm just like, do. And then all of a sudden I'm like half a block down the road and I'm like, I don't remember that last half block.
Even take in and appreciate the nature around you. Now, if you live in the city, you might just have seagulls and pigeons. but
But
it's
hey,
still
that
some.
pigeon's foot is broken. And hey, that pigeon is fatter than the other one. And you know what I mean? Like, or that car is gray. That car is dirty.
Yeah,
That car, you know what I mean? Like, you want to try to maybe not necessarily dirty, because that is kind of a judgment, because that's kind of on a spectrum. But anyways, you want to try to use the most non-judgmental terms you can, because when you start using those judgmental terms, you use them with yourself. So to push
yes,
that out, it allows you to take a non-judgmental stance with yourself, even if it's just for a couple of minutes. That I think really helps people throughout their day, because it's kind of just like a peace of mind moment. It's kind of just telling your brain, excuse the expression, but shut the fuck up.
yeah. And
And
another thing now, start with the non-judgmental, because this takes more practice. I'm still working on it. Is eventually, because yeah, we do all make judgment statements, but if you could turn those to more positive statements, I mean, I happen to live in the woods now, so I mean, I go walk and I get to see like deer and groundhogs and shit. But like, if you're making a judgmental statement, try to make a positive one, like, dude, that's really awesome, or hey, the leaves are starting to come in on the trees. But
or hey, that lady's rocking that outfit. You know what I mean? And maybe
exactly,
even go tell them. I can't tell you how many times I've had a bad day and I walk up and somebody's like, "Ooh, you looking good today," and I'm like, "I am."
show
Makes you
enough.
feel better. Okay, so really quick, kind of like the end. Oh, almost forgot. So one other thing that we do before we start the DBT, is not actual DBT, but a quick overview, is you can do this by yourself throughout the day. It's kind of like a once a day thing. I usually do it at the end of the day. But in DBT, because we met weekly, we would do it once a week. And it's called Beauty and the Beast. And what you do is you pick one thing that either you're really happy about or you're really proud of, obviously the beauty, and then something that you're having a really, really hard time with. And the whole point of that is to allow you to kind of pick one and one, right? To concentrate on, instead of having all of that go through your mind and your brain's like, you didn't look good in that dress earlier, and you've gained a little bit of weight, and da 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 da, and da 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 da. When you do the Beauty and the Beast, you're able to just focus on one specific thing that you're having trouble with, and maybe you can make that what you deal with on the next day, or what you're going to deal with for the next week. It just kind of helps prioritize and hone in um, specific things that you're dealing with, as opposed to just kind of having them all go, around your head. So, Fish, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay,
You
cool.
get to do the first Beauty and the Beast. One thing that I will say that we do try to do in DBT is you want to try to keep each thought, each beauty or beast, under 30 seconds to a minute. And the reasoning for that is so you don't get into cyclic thinking, where
Okay,
all of a sudden it's like you're talking about how you thought that you looked fat in a dress that you wore this week, and then, oh, now none of your clothes fit, and now you're not going to be able to get a date, and now da 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 da. No, you keep it short, keep it succinct, and keep it simple. So, Fish, go ahead, take it away. What's your Beauty and
all right.
Beast for this week?
So, my beauty, and this is the one I am in cyclic thinking about, and probably going to be like that all fucking day today.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my bad. Just real quick. So typically, Kelly and I, we swear a lot, but
Yeah.
we're we're trying not to, because YouTube doesn't like it, and especially me being a male, I don't want to come off like just some angry cussing douchebag at y'all. So we are trying to watch our language on this, because also it might be nice if you see something useful for someone who's a little younger and you might want to show this to them.
Yeah. So we're gonna try, but we're not perfect.
So,
So go ahead, see if you
beauty,
can give it without cussing.
correct. So beauty, so this album that I've been waiting on, and I didn't even know when it was coming out, so it was a really awesome surprise. I get a notification that it's dropped, and so I've just been super stoked blasting that a lot this morning. And then my beast, um, I definitely got a little like stuck in the depression, and I got about half of what I had planned to do done down here in my space this past week. But I'm not getting stuck, because I'm like, well, that sucked. It used to be I would be like that for a whole day, days on end. I mean, so the bad days aren't as bad and they don't last as long. And I'm like, at least I got half of the stuff I wanted done.
That's awesome. Are you finished with your Beauty and the Beast? I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, that covers them both.
Okay, cool. Let's see. Okay, so let's start with the beauty. It's always easier. Everyone always starts with a beauty unless it's like a really bad week. So my beauty, probably this week would be this podcast. Like I said, Fish and I have been talking about this for probably a couple of years at this point, and finally decided to take the plunge. And
we start.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
It's been
started
a couple
talking more
years.
we started talking a lot more seriously over the past, like, what was it, last May when I started the other podcast?
Yeah.
When I started the other one, we started talking more about this.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my beauty, I guess, getting over my insecurities about being on camera and what I look like, and how after shaving my head for 2 years and finally growing out that I am in a perpetual Karen hairdo state until it gets longer. And then let's see, my beast would probably be, for those of you who don't know, I have a lot of acronyms behind my name due to diagnoses, and one of them that isn't a acronym is I have fibromyalgia, and I also have arthritis in my spine. So some days are good, some days are bad. And this past week has been a very high pain week, which makes it very hard for me to interact with my friends and get the things done that I want to do, and be the very limited amount of social I am, even though, COVID's still going on. So yeah, I would say my beast this week was kind of regulating my emotions during like those high pain moments. Sometimes you just kind of want to go rage on people who have nothing to do with what's going on with you, but they're there. And that's not okay, and you shouldn't do that, but no one's perfect. Yeah. So moving on. A real quick overview. I think it's really important that people know what DBT is and where it came from. So, and Fish, you and I both know, I mean, I am in no way a guru, but I do know a little bit more about DBT than you do. So please feel free to chime in at any point in time and ask a question or ask for clarification, because I know for some people, they don't even know what DBT is, who may be listening.
For our listeners, so I know I said it earlier, so I'm going to just reestablish. Hopefully it makes y'all more comfortable. As far as DBT, I know of it. I know of very little, but for the most part, as far as doing DBT goes, I am learning along with y'all. And if y'all have questions, feel free to hit us up in the comments. We will answer.
Oh, absolutely. We will answer. So real quick, so DBT is something that kind of came about in like the late 70s, early 80s. And it was coined by this woman named Linehan. So Linehan, she's from the East Coast. She spent time in a mental institution. She went through electroshock therapy. Like there are bits of like her 20s that she doesn't remember because of the electroshock therapy that she was put through, essentially. And something that always fascinated her and that she also dealt with was suicidal ideation. And those of you who don't know what suicidal ideation is very different from being suicidal. Suicidal means you have a plan. You have a plan to take action. Suicidal ideation is more so, and this is very generally speaking, along the lines of you're in traffic, somebody cuts you off, you get really pissed off, and in your brain you go, you know what, it'd be a lot easier if they just fucking hit me. You know what I mean? Like suicidal ideation is more of like, I don't want to say necessarily the fantasizing about it, but it's more of like the idea of thinking about it as opposed to making a plan of action.
It's kind of that feel. It seems like that feeling of I don't really want to be here anymore.
Yes, but you don't.
Like you have no plan to make that happen, but you feel like it.
Both are extremely serious. Do not mistake that. Oh, if you have one, then it's no. Both of them are extremely serious and do require, in my opinion, immediate intervention.
Because ideation can lead to a plan.
Absolutely.
if you're having ideation, you are already spiraling. I still have it every so often.
Oh, no, yeah, I completely agree. So it was founded in Seattle because that's where she did her PhD at. And the original reason for her, quote unquote, inventing DBT was to help adult women with histories of chronic suicide attempts, suicidal ideation, urges of self harm, and self mutilation. And then with going through her therapy and helping all of these women, she then was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, like what I have. And then she started realizing that the common denominator under all of these things, you know, the suicidal ideation, the self mutilation, the self harm, was extreme emotional dysregulation. And those of you who don't know what that means, it essentially means you cannot regulate your own emotions. I still, at 34, with a lot of years under my belt of therapy and groups, still have a very hard time regulating my emotions at times. And it makes life very hard to live, and it makes interacting with others very hard. So essentially, she identified the 5 areas of dysregulation. So these 5 areas, you have to have something in all 5 areas to be considered someone who has BPD, but you do not have to have BPD to use DBT. And I know that's a lot of like acronyms. So long story short, you do not have to have an actual diagnosed mental health disorder to actually use the skills that DBT teaches you. I personally think this is something they should start teaching in schools at the elementary age. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But the 5 areas are emotion, behavior, relationships, self-image, and cognition. And there's a little bit under each area of dysregulation. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of symptoms within each of those categories that either qualify you for having BPD or is a sign that you have emotional dysregulation, and DBT skills might be something that could help you. Now, I'm not saying this to diagnose or do any of that with anybody. This is just me putting the information and the skill shares out there. If I say anything that pops into your mind and it's something you want to learn more about, do your own research. And I know with everything that we said before, try to find someone who is a professional that you can talk to about this to get you the help that you need. So under the emotions, some of the emotions is under the emotion umbrella is overwhelming emotional pain, meaning nothing that you do stops the feeling that you have. You can't control those overwhelming feelings. Chronic anxiety, extreme sensitivity to emotional cues from your environment. Now that's like, this is something that I deal with. And Fish, I don't know if this is something you've ever experienced, but let's say you're having a conversation with somebody and you're really excited about it. And you're talking with the person. And as you're talking with the person goes like this. While you're talking. My brain looks at that and says, they don't care what I'm talking about. They're not interested. They don't care about me. And oh my God, now they're mad at me because they don't want me to keep talking. So that's kind of like that high emotional reactivity to like your environment and to other people, is that the slightest changes in your environment or your interactions with other people cause a dysregulated response.
Oh, no, I don't. I totally, because I have, I mean, I've got to rebuild it because I just kind of let it fall apart because it was just could not deal with the stress. Because I typically have like, I do get like that with talking to people. My biggest thing is my morning routine. If anything it goes out of place for the routine I have planned, I start losing my shit. And
That is,
the worst.
yep.
And then one of my things, oh crap, I need to look into is sometimes I'll get stuck where I look at it like, say, a faucet or a valve, where this valve of being pissed off just gets stuck on, and for like hours and hours and hours I just can't get it to turn off.
Mm-hmm. That is overwhelming. Or no, where is it? I have all my notes here. Excuse me. That's also low tolerance for frustration, which is another thing under the emotion aspect of DBT. Is a lot of people don't deal with frustration or anger because a lot of the time the precursor to that is somebody doing something that you didn't want them to do, or that they, or whatever, and then you take their action as an example of something that it may not be. And you take it as an example of what's in here. And what's in here is what I like to call the shitty committee, where they just like to talk shit the whole entire time. And it makes it really hard to switch that valve off. So yeah, no, you made a really good point on that one, because I'm the same way with my morning routine. If I can't get outside with my cup of coffee to do my thing for like at least an hour, I am not in a good state for the rest of the day. Okay, so moving on. For behavior, people with BPD or emotional dysregulation typically use impulsive, self-destructive behaviors as a way to regulate intense negative emotions and to cope with life. And one of those things, obviously, is drug and alcohol abuse. You know what I mean? That was something that I struggled with. I struggled with that from 15 until I was probably about 30, 31. And it wasn't like the whole time. Like I would have times where I'd be like sober for multiple years, like in between. But yeah, you want to numb the pain. You want to alter your reality. You want to dissociate. You don't want to deal with it.
Or you're intentionally turning it into a self-harm thing because you know that sitting home, getting drunk alone, you're probably going to be up in your shit.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
you know that for a fact, and you're intentionally doing it.
Absolutely. And something that like one of my friends said to me once is, you know what, you can get high, you can go and do whatever you want to do, but what's going to happen when you're not high anymore? That stuff is still going to be there. It didn't go anywhere. Like you didn't deal with it. As the vicious cycle of addiction, which I'm sure once we get a little bit more shows on, we'll have one about that.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that.
Yeah. So the next one is relationships. So people with BPD or emotional dysregulation have a difficulty tolerating separation or perceived rejection from those they are closest to and can live in constant fear of abandonment. This is my everyday life. I don't know if you experience this, Fish, but for me, very much like the sensitivity to like your surroundings is when somebody responds to something in a way that like I didn't expect or that I didn't want or whatever, my brain automatically goes to, they don't want you, they don't like you, they're going to leave, they're not really your friend, they're going to abandon you, they're rejecting you. When in all reality, they could have just sneezed in the middle of the conversation and walked away to get a tissue, but because they, you know what I mean? Because the way that my brain perceives it, I perceive it as a sign of rejection. And with people who are emotionally dysregulated, rejection can be intense. Intense. Like it's one of the descriptors for people with borderline personality disorder is we're called emotional burn victims, in the sense that we are so raw all the time from all the emotions that we constantly have to battle, that the tiniest little from somebody else on an emotional level hurts everything. And that's extremely hard to regulate if you don't have the skills for that. I mean, Fish, I know you and I both have friends who in a way are like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Where one little thing happens and all of a sudden it's like the sky is falling, the world is ending, nobody loves me. And you're like, dude, your partner just like went out with the friends, or whatever. And it just like, it turns into like this huge thing. So
I've got the equally unhealthy opposite end of that. Like, I think because rejection, abandonment, all that has happened so many times that my thing became, oh, you're not cool with me? Well, fuck off then. I don't need you. It's still just as unhealthy as its more codependent partner.
So no, absolutely.
Neither one is good. Healthy somewhere in the middle of those two.
No, it's the gray area. And that's what DBT is about. It's learning about how to live and survive in the gray. So, some of the topics under relationships that DBT would help with is intense fear of abandonment. We kind of covered that. Um, all eggs in one basket. That's a big one. And those of you who don't know that saying, it basically means like putting all of your faith in one thing. Like my
This has
life,
become
like my life is going to get better as long as I stay in this relationship. Doesn't
this
matter
is
how toxic or how codependent or how whatever
Mhm.
it is. I'm going to stay in this relationship because of this, or I'm going to keep this job that's not effective and they treat me like crap because doing anything else is too hard. So I'm just going to stay right here. That's kind of an example of that. Frantic attempts to avoid being left. And this kind of plays into the behavior aspect where we talked about suicide. So something that's kind of a big part of emotional dysregulation is the frantic attempts to being left. Very large percentage of the time go right with suicidal threats, where you don't know how to communicate in that moment that you need extra help, extra attention, because whether you don't feel like you're worth it, or your friends aren't going to do it, or you're just a piece of shit, or whatever. So you fake or make something up to get people to pay attention to you because you can't communicate why you actually need something. Or if you and your partner have been together for 5 years and you both decide that, or one person decides that it's not working anymore. So to keep them from leaving, you threaten to commit suicide. That's kind of an example of that. Need for constant reassurance. And the other person becomes a focal point for self. This is more specific to people with borderline personality disorder, which is a complete lack of sense of self. This is something that I deal with still to this day. I change who I am dependent on who I hang out with, because my sense of self is directly related to the people that I'm hanging out with. So, for example, if I go and I hang out with my punk rock friends, it's all about that punk rock life. And I'm wearing my, combat shit kicking boots, and, I'm wearing my leather jacket, and, we're chain smoking cigarettes and we're drinking cheap whiskey. But then I go and I hang out with my floamies, my fire spinning friends, and I wear like free flowing clothes and I put on pretty makeup and I'm like super mindful and like, respectful of everybody else. You know what I mean? Like there's no in between for me. There's no like person Kelly is. It's who I am around other people. And yes, it's something that I need to work on, but it's something that's very, very prevalent
Yeah,
in
and I
people
mean,
who have issues with regulating their emotions.
and I've like kind of was there when I was younger. I mean, that's how I ended up like super like I'm into punk and ska like comic nerds are into their comics. Like I know an
You
insane amount
do.
of sometimes
You
inane
do.
shit. And so instead of there's not a me, I made that me because I'm like, no, I actually believe in this crap.
That's
Because I mean,
awesome.
really, whoever you are, like whoever Kells is, it is the sum of all that stuff. It's just figuring out who that person is. With like for you, it's the flow me's, the this, the that. Where me, like what you see is what you get in any given situation.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And, part of DBT and doing all of that therapy and going through all of that is it basically helps you sort through all the bullshit,
Yeah.
deal with your trauma. And then once you're done with all of that, the end result is it's kind of like a blank slate. You're kind of like, what do I want to do with this?
I mean,
How do I
now,
continue on?
now I'm not trying to say my situation is better because I've got my own toxic trait of I don't give a crap what anyone's going to think of me to a very unhealthy and detrimental point.
That's fair.
Like
That's
that's
fair.
just the honest truth.
I mean, and in a way, like, like that's kind of like respectable, you know what I mean? That no bars held, like you're just gonna be you
Yeah.
and whatever. But I can definitely see how you would say that would be like a toxic trait, because in a way, sometimes you cut people off before you have a chance even to like either get to know them or to maybe build a friendship or relationship with them. You know, you're kind of cutting yourself off at the knees in some situations, for lack of a better term. That actually, that is one of the DBT skills that we'll probably go over. There's one called avoid avoiding, that would probably work for that, but we'll put that on a shelf for another one.
Yeah, well, that'll be later in the series here.
Right. So I'm just going to go through self-image and cognition like super quick. So people with BPD and emotional dysregulation have a fragile, shifting sense of self. And sudden change, even a good one, can destabilize a person's sense of themselves and their place in the world. So some things that get affected with that is like your sense of bad or wrong. You have deep insecurities, the rapidly changing identity that we just discussed. Environment determines self-worth. This is something that I deal with. When I go to the fire jams where me and my friends fire spin, sometimes I tend to get really self-conscious because like I'm not very good. I've been doing the same like 5 tricks for 5 years because my body doesn't really let me learn anything more. And I'll go up and spin and no one cheers and no one claps and no one's like, yeah, Kelly, woo, get it. But then somebody else will come up next to me who's like, either in my judgment, not as good or as good as me. And everybody's like cheering them on. And then all of a sudden, because that happens in my mind, I'm like, nobody wants me here. Nobody likes me. I need to leave. I need to go home. You know, it's very environment dependent instead of me just sitting there and telling the shitty committee to shut the fuck up and let me have fun with my friends. Sense of self is dependent on others. We kind of went through that. And then lastly, shifting contradictory goals or values. So very much like I was saying earlier, depending on who you hang out with, your values and your goals shift. Like, let's say you go and you hang out with a specific group of friends earlier on in the day, and like they're all in college, right? And you're like, oh yeah, I want to go back to college. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And then you go and you hang out with another group of friends later who are all like artists or something. And then you go and you hang out with them and you're like, oh no, you know, I don't think I'm going to go to college. I think I'm going to concentrate on my art. It's basically allowing your life to be dictated by those around you instead of figuring out a way to do it on your own. And then lastly, the cognition. People with emotional dysregulation and BPD can have impaired and distorted thinking, especially when under stress. Something that like my mom used to say when I was younger is when I would get in those intense states, she used your brain is firing on all cylinders. And when you're doing that, you're in the emotional mind state. You're not dealing with your logical mind. And your emotional mind, you know, like takes over, which makes what hard? Logic.
Everything.
Exactly. And when you're dealing with severe emotional dysregulation and you're constantly dysregulated, it's going to cause issues. I had a previous relationship. I was with the person for 6 years. And the last year we were together, I was so triggered and so dysregulated all the time. We couldn't talk about anything because I didn't have the mental ability to actually like sit down and concentrate on the other person. It's very debilitating. To be completely honest, I'm definitely happy I'm not there anymore. And to anybody who might be listening who is there, I promise you it gets better. You just have to find your way out of the shitstorm. And sometimes it takes some time to get out of the shitstorm. So, you know, just pretend there's a little hole with light coming through at the end of the shitstorm and you'll find out. So those of you who don't know what dialectic means, it means establishing truths on both sides. So instead of using either or, like that black and white thinking or what's considered splitting in the mental health community, you use and. And an example of that is, I am doing the best that I can, and I can do better. So you're validating yourself in the moment right now that you are doing the best that you can, but you know it's not the best you can do. So you can do better. And living in the dialectic or using dialectic is like living in that state of mind, you know? It's like being able to accept the reality as it is and find a way to move forward. because I feel like, Fish, I don't know if you do this, but like I black and white think all the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'll like talk on the phone with a friend and they're like, dude, those aren't the only two options. And I'm like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about? And they're like, oh, I'm here, let me list them. You know what I mean? So the goal for DBT is to have balanced thoughts, balanced emotion, and through that get balanced action, which is kind of like the middle path. In DBT, that's what we call the wise mind. So you have your emotional mind and your logical mind, right? Am I using? Yep, no, that's the right, left. And
Yep.
then the wise mind is supposed to be when the two overlap, when you can be logical and emotional at the same time and honor yourself and the other person or just yourself that you're dealing with. So under like all of those topics, the emotions, the behavior, all of that, there are 4 topics that we're going to cover, not today, but in other episodes of DBT, and they are comprised of distress tolerance skills, mindfulness, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness. There's about 38 skills total. I'm probably only going to pick about 4 to 5 under each category. And Fish and I are going to go through them and just kind of show people that these are skills that you can use. I am not a DBT counselor. I do not have a degree. Mostly this podcast is just going to be like a skills share. Like for me, when I'm a fire spinner, we have skills shares where like people show up and everyone shows each other like the tricks that they know how to do and stuff like that. That's kind of what this is. Also, Fish and I have also been working on a list, which we're probably going to post somewhere on the Facebook page and in the comments of the YouTube account. We are going to give a list of the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. There's a text. I believe it's 741-741, and you text BRAVE in all caps. And within a few minutes, a mental health professional will be texting you to help you get through that moment and help you plan and get you in touch with your local crisis centers. Something that I also learned online is that they're also listed by county. So if you type in the county that you live in, like I live in Contra Costa County in California, if I type in Contra Costa County crisis, it'll bring up a hotline. So sometimes that works a little bit better because it allows you to find local places to go to and get the help that you need. Something that we're also going to put up on there is an international list. There's an international directory online separated in alphabetical order by country. You click on the country and it gives you a list of all the crisis hotlines within that country that you can use. So yeah, basically, if you need the help, get it. Because the whole point of this podcast is to teach you how to, or to share with you how to advocate for yourself, advocate for others. You know what I mean? Stop waiting around for other people. Stop waiting for that bill to pass to get you free healthcare. Start working on yourself now, because you can never do too much, really, when it comes to your mental health.
For anyone who becomes a regular listener, just to let y'all know, so I've got something I did for the blog and my other social media stuff. It's a link card, and it's going to be a growing document as we do this. And it will be in the links for every episode we do. So if you forgot any of the old stuff or want to see what's new that we've added, you just click that link card and just go through it. See what you need. It'll have our chosen contact info if anyone needs to talk to either of us, or it might just be the Facebook page. I don't know. But
yeah, we're still trying to figure out specifics.
Yeah.
But there will be a way to get a hold of us, whether it's through the Facebook page or we put like the podcast email up for you guys to contact us. One thing though that I do request of those who do try to contact us like personally, and what I mean by personally is like through the email or messaging the page, is that we have gone through the respect to make sure that at the beginning of every show we add triggers. So if there's something that you want to share with us that like that you went through and like you used a skill or something that we said like triggered like a good thing for you and you want to share that for us, please add a trigger on like a trigger warning at the top of your email if you are going to be discussing self-harm, suicide, sexual assault, anything that has to do with anything that might be a trigger, because Matt and I are both also human, and would, you know, like a heads up for that, because something in that message might be a trigger for him and I. So if you guys could please just remember to do that, that would be super awesome.
And especially if you post openly, do put a trigger warning, because you don't know who's reading it.
Absolutely.
And if you don't, one of us will hit you up privately and remind you about it, because I'm aware we're all learning. Mm-hmm. But also, if you're a complete jerk about it, you might not be allowed to post to us anymore. Because
we're kind of going to have a zero tolerance about that when it comes to hate speech, instigation, you know, lack of trigger warnings. You know, if we tell you 3 times you got to put a trigger warning on this and you don't, we won't necessarily block you from being able to hear the podcast, not at all, but you might be blocked from making comments for a little while, because this is a safe and respectful space. Sans, you know, profanity, you know, so we just want to make sure that everybody feels safe here, and part of that is just making sure to put the proper trigger warnings on things. But on a happy note, to kind of tie up the podcast, Fish, why don't you tell them about our super awesome musical thing that we're doing?
So we don't know that we're going to do this every episode. It's kind of a goal, but a big thing for me especially has always been music and mental health, because I mean, especially where I come from, the underground, and I mean, the last particularly 5 years has been absolutely amazing for more of that conversation about mental health happening. I mean, I know back in like even the 90s within punk, ska, and emo, it was happening to an extent, but it just keeps getting better. And so we're going to talk about an album by We Are the Union called Self-Care. This was kind of the one we agreed on, and that's because literally the entire subject of this solid ska record is self-care, mental health.
The whole thing is about that. Now, just so you guys know, though, it is mental health stuff. So
it is.
I don't remember necessarily all of the triggers with the album. So if maybe you want to touch on that.
Okay, I'm going to try to remember. So the album, I'm going to say there's a trigger warning on here, and there's definitely self-harm, a bit of suicide. I don't know whether or not it's a trigger, and I honestly don't remember whether or not Reed at all addresses, well, okay, so during this album, Reed Wolcott was a male. Now, Reed Wolcott is a trans woman, so I'll say she, and I don't know whether or not that album addresses any of her dysphoria, but maybe Kelly remembers, but there's just an overarching trigger warning, okay?
Yeah, so like, let's just go ahead and say that the trigger warnings are suicide, self-harm, and self-harm does include self-mutilating, drinking, drug use, drugs, you know what I mean? I already said that. Suicide, and possible dysphoria or transition topics that could be triggering for some people. So just know that going out of the gate. But yeah, Matt, Fish and I are going to try to, like, maybe every week, every other week, switch off. This week he's going to pick, the next time I'm going to pick, and we're going to try to pick an album or a song that helped us get through something regarding our mental health, or something that we think is just a really good proponent for mental health. And this week he picked We Are the Union. I don't know if you want to go in a little bit about like why this album helped you. We are also going to put the link for it on YouTube and the Facebook page, so you can like listen to it whenever you want.
Yeah, I'll definitely go into it. I was going to have the CD to show off, but honestly, I don't remember where I put it. But I ended up getting a coffee mug that's actually from the stuff for this album. So We Are the Union. Then the other side, which is one of their songs, Surfing on the Waves of Depression, which I'm actually going to talk about that to start with, because so the whole song, like part of it is I'm going surfing on the waves of depression. I'm going to write it like I don't know how to swim. Now, to me, that was Because sometimes when you've got shit going on, like, you feel like crap, but you're not entirely sure why. And to me, that was, I'm just going to go head on into those waves and find out what's what. Now, this can go one of two ways. Either you're using it as a tool to help yourself, or you're doing it as a self-harm. Because trust me, it is, because you will end up feeling like crap at the end of it, no matter what. So
And
just know that.
sometimes you're not aware that you're
Yeah,
doing that.
precisely. I mean, this song is about being aware that you're doing it. Like that. And I talk about this as someone who has actually done this as a form of self-harm. Like, I know what it's going to do, but I decide to dig in anyways. I mean, some good things have come from that once I learned how to weaponize that trauma and make it a good thing. But it was a long and painful process.
So is there anything specific, not necessarily like specific song titles or anything?
Oh, I was going to go. Yeah, so I was actually going to go super deep. So this past summer, I had a ridiculously hard summer, like family deaths and just dealing with the new environment and all kinds of other things. And so I ended up listening to this one a lot. And I mean, I basically really intensely buried myself in ska because it was the only thing that felt good. I mean, this many months later, it's what, February, that was over the summer. I'm not going to count. I feel better about things, but I'm still there of, this is the only thing that's comfortable right now. So at this point, I'm not trying new things stylistically or whatever, because they keep making me uncomfortable. And so this album, because of how much it deals with all of that, like the song Fake World, where it's like, tear down the fake world and build up the people around you, which is, dude, get the hell off Facebook. Unless you're talking to actual real friends that you're communicating with, if you're just doom scrolling and spinning your wheels on social media, which also another song where Reed's saying, why can't I put my phone away? It doesn't mean anything. And then talking about being strung out on retweets and attention. We do this because we're fucking lonely. And that's just what it comes down to.
Amen to that. I mean, the whole debacle with my Facebook account. I took a big break, from Facebook for a significant amount of time. And the strangest thing about it, and I don't know if this is the same way for other people, but when I got off of Facebook and I deleted, my account got deleted, but when I deleted the app from my phone and my iPad and everything else, the weirdest thing is after a couple days, I didn't even notice. It wasn't like there was this huge thing missing from my life. And the biggest thing that was missing from my life was the accessibility I had to my friends, because nobody exchanges phone numbers anymore. It's all through Messenger, and so that was a crappy part about it. But not having a Facebook for 6 months, I didn't feel as lonely. I had more time to myself. I was more present in the conversations that I was having and when I was hanging out with people. Anxiety disorders have gone through the roof, especially in adolescence over, the past 5 to 10 years because of what?
Yeah. Social media.
Bingo. So I think it's really cool that they touched on that and that album.
I've been 2 or 3 different songs too.
Yeah. No, I've been jamming out to it since I was at the park earlier this week.
And I found that so interesting because I'm like, dude, almost no one who's talking about mental health is talking about the detrimental effect of social media, except this band. I mean, there might be a few others, but it's they had several songs addressing it because it is probably the reason why anxiety, depression, and suicide rates have gone up. Because now all the bullshit that we were bombarded with of magazines or people that are just simply better looking than you, now you've got this on overload and you aren't getting away from it because it's in your damn pocket all the time.
No, there's definitely a correlation between all of that. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and especially someone like me with a personality disorder and a very large lack of self, you know, you go onto Instagram or you go onto Facebook and you see all these gorgeous girls with perfect eyebrows and like these gorgeous bodies. And like, I'm 34, I've had a kid, I've got fibromyalgia, I can't work out. I probably will never have a muscular physique ever again. Yet I constantly am forced to stare at these women that I will never look like. And now I'm depressed and I'm eating a package of cookies from the grocery store. So
Like, right. Like, look, as far as looks, I'm just happy the eyelashes in one eye grew back after I burned them off accidentally.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but being a fire
I laugh
dancer,
at
I
it.
burned my bangs. I burned so many things. You're just happy when it grows back.
It's like, look, I don't care. Like, I have them. That's nice.
That's why I had to shave my head. I was fire breathing and I tried to walk through the fire and I waited a second too long. I walked through the fire and I had bangs. And when I walked out of the fire, my bangs were like this and all singed. And because they were singed so far back, I couldn't even do like the cute punk bangs. So I ended up having to just shave. No. So I ended up having to shave my head, which was great. I loved it. I did it for a year and a half. Dyeing my hair all these crazy colors. I mean, you know, but man, I feel it. You get happy when that shit grows back. You're like, oh, good.
Oh, thank God.
Right. So, all right. So, we're gonna go ahead and say right now, why don't you go ahead and try to contact us through the page if anybody has any suggestions, comments, or you know, anything else that maybe has worked for you that maybe we can add on to the show or that you want to add to. Or hey, if you guys have songs that you've listened to through hard times, you know what I mean? Go ahead and post them on the comments on YouTube or Facebook. Or just make sure anything you post needs a trigger warning if it covers anything. Like if you're going to play like Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge, a lot of people know that song is about what? Heroin usage. So you're going to put that song on and be like, oh, this song really helped me. You know what I mean? Make sure that you put trigger warning heroin usage or drug usage. You know what I mean? Like, just make sure to be respectful of other people. And if you're not sure, add the trigger warning anyway. You can, I know there's a lot of people on Facebook or whatever that are like, yeah, too many triggers. Everybody's triggered all the time, blah, blah, blah. But do it anyway.
And just to let everyone know, look, because I'm bad at this. If you don't remember the specifics, just put TW, okay? So everyone knows there might be something someone might be triggered by if they check this out.
Absolutely.
So even if you only put the letters TW, that is acceptable because you are saying there is a trigger warning.
Absolutely. So we will go ahead and go ahead and contact us through the page. Feel free to add anything in, like we said, into the comments on either the YouTube or the Facebook page. We are going to be releasing a new episode every Monday at midnight. So Sunday into Monday at midnight. So it's ready for Mental Health Mondays.
I mean, realistically, it'll probably be put out on the YouTube at some point on Sunday, but you'll be able to listen to it by Monday morning and whatever time zone you're in.
Yes. So just a quick heads up for next week. Next week we're gonna kind of concentrate on mindfulness. It's probably going to be a little bit of a shorter podcast this week. We had a lot to get through.
Also, I kind of wanted to cover cognitive distortions next week. Was a note I wrote down.
Yeah, no,
I've got a cool little paper on that. So
yeah, and we can totally do that.
And I think that might be a good idea as we're beginning to get into what DBT even is.
No, we can totally do that. So we'll do, and please feel free, if you need any clarification on anything that we've discussed today, please feel free to put it in the comments and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Please know that we are a resource, but we are not doctors. So if you ask us a question that we're not comfortable answering, we will tell you to seek professional help. It's not our job to diagnose, treat, or prescribe. We're just kind of here to hang out, share information, and have a good time.
Exactly. We're hoping to give y'all a couple of tools here. And you may still need to take those tools and run with them into some form of therapy, but
absolutely. We're giving you a leg up.
Yeah. Or maybe your damage isn't too bad, and what we are putting out here will be enough. And if you're one of those fortunate ones, that is totally amazing and awesome.
Yeah, you're your best judge of your situation. Okay, so comments, trigger warnings. The link for the We Are the Union album is going to be on our YouTube
Yes,
and our Facebook page. And I guess that's kind of the end of it. I guess we'll see you guys next Monday.
for sure. All right,
All
catch y'all
right,
later.
guys.
Peace.
Yes, thanks for tuning in and helping us get through our first podcast. It might have been a little bit rough, but it will get better. And thank you for everybody that listened. I hope everybody has a great week. Remember to stay mindful and be nice to yourself, okay?